Kirby and the Forgotten Land was announced on September 23rd of 2021 and released on the 25th of March the following year. The game came as a great surprise to the fanbase, and many were excited to see Kirby finally make the jump to full 3D environments. I recently played Kirby's latest outing to 100% completion, and today I'm sharing my full thoughts about the experience. I try to roll credits on every game I buy, but I usually don't play them to maximum completion. For me, Kirby was an exception. I completed the game and post-game with all Waddle Dees saved and figures collected, granting me the congratulatory 100% end screen. Now, this game isn't super difficult to complete, and I'm far from the only one to do this, but I do want to mention it because I found the Forgotten Land in particular to really encourage completion. From the completion counter on the pause menu to the hidden missions and collectibles in each stage, the game subtly goads players to seek everything it has to offer. And I'd argue this is pretty effective, because at least in my case, I took the bait. Kirby and the Forgotten Land exudes a unique energy. It appeals to those who are looking for a fun, lighthearted, casual experience, but also provides a clear roadmap for those like me who want to take a more hardcore approach to the game. At the same time, it represents a bold new direction for a famous gaming character. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is one of the year's best and most important titles. It's on one hand a treat, and the other a trial. It's light, but gets very dark. A complete experience from every angle, and a picture-perfect intro to the new phase of Kirby. It begins with Kirby doing his regular day-to-day on planet Popstar, when suddenly a mysterious vortex opens in the sky, which begins sucking in everything, including Kirby, to an alternate dimension. Kind of ironic that Kirby is the one being sucked in here, since he's usually the one doing the suction. I guess we can call that karma. After being tossed around for a good while, Kirby finds himself washed up ashore on a beach. This surprisingly tranquil environment serves as our intro to the Forgotten Land we expected from the game's title. Right away, as soon as we gain control of Kirby, things just seem to click. If you've played any of his previous outings, you'll feel right at home, even with the added dimension. We can move around, float, suck in objects, and spit them out. It feels just like a 2D Kirby, just with a little more freedom of direction. There's very little learning curve to Kirby's controls due to the game's neat auto-aiming system that takes out a lot of the frustrations that there would otherwise be when aiming attacks and projectiles in a 3D space. And as we trek on, we're treated right away to one of the game's most incredible scenes. We're forced down a narrow path through the jungle, only for it to open up to the wide expanse we see here. The camera shifts far behind Kirby to emphasize the tall buildings and skylines surrounding the area. Up until now, Kirby platformers have yet to see an area that looks this vast. And even though our freedom of movement is actually not as boundless as it may appear, even just the visual effect does a lot to get the player excited about the world they're beginning to explore. The concept of copy abilities are nothing new to those familiar with previous games in the franchise. Kirby's claim to fame is being able to copy the abilities of certain enemies he sucks up, allowing him to gain that power for himself. For example, swallowing a sword enemy will give Kirby himself a sword, and ingesting a fire enemy will give Kirby fire-breathing abilities. Most of the series staple copy abilities return, and all of them feel very natural in the transition to 3D space. There are a total of 12 unique copy abilities in the Forgotten Land, which isn't a staggering number in itself. However, what's unique about these 12 is that they're all upgradable to one or more increasingly powerful evolutions. By finding the right hidden scroll in a level, Kirby can upgrade, say for example, the new Ranger copy ability to its next stage, in which Kirby wields 2 pistols instead of 1. In upgrading to its final form, Space Ranger allows the ability to deal much more damage, with fully charged shots creating a vortex that stuns enemies who touch it. For most of the game, I really favored the elemental copy abilities Fire and Ice, as I just found them really good. Fire is useful due to the residual burn damage it can deal to bosses, and its evolved form, Dragonfire, not only looks incredible, but adds a flame charge that is both a strong attack and movement tool. The Ice copy ability was my go-to in a pinch. Blowing ice on an enemy for an extended time causes them to freeze, dealing massive damage when they unthaw. and while using any ice copy ability, the ZR button, which serves as Kirby's block button, will create a shield of ice around him. I found this way too good, as Kirby can essentially hide in shield fully invincible during boss fights, just waiting for an opening to attack. The only counter to the ice shield are fire attacks, which the developers clearly knew due to how prevalent they are later in the game. However, nothing compares to late game when Kirby gains access to the fully evolved and powered up version of the Wild Hammer, the Masked Hammer. A fully charged Masked Hammer swing is enough to basically one-shot most of the bosses. This kind of damage output was a lifesaver for some of the game's tougher challenges, albeit being a bit broken. So yeah, I'd say upgrading copy abilities is definitely worth it. In addition to copy abilities, this game also introduces a brand new mechanic called Mouthful Modes. With these, Kirby goes full Super Mario Odyssey and wraps himself around various inanimate objects. Whether it's ingesting a vending machine to shoot soda can projectiles, or engulfing a set of stairs to help him reach higher heights, Kirby can use Mouthful Modes to defeat enemies or open paths forward that would otherwise be unavailable. There are 14 different Mouthful Modes, essentially raising the total number of unique power-ups to 26. Some will give you more mileage than others though. Abilities like Archmouth or Coaster Mouth will take up an entire section of some stages, while something like Storage Mouth is painfully simple. Kirby surrounds a locker in order to rip it from the wall so we can find out what's behind, and it doesn't go much deeper than that. All of Kirby's abilities wouldn't be much though, without the great levels in which to use them. Luckily, the Forgotten Land delivers on this front. The game features a handful of environments which house a variety of unique stages. I was wowed by many of the game's set pieces, as Kirby is thrown into large, realistic-looking worlds, which is unprecedented territory for the series. Looking up at the huge Blizzard Bridge and first exploring the waste where life began are unforgettable moments. But it's not just the case of the world being visually impressive. The Forgotten Lands levels are full of smart platforming bits as well, which stay fresh and varied from moment to moment. One minute, Kirby uses the ring mouth to blow on a fan which raises walkable platforms, and the next, he's using it to propel and pilot a boat on the water. Most of the copy abilities are explored to great depth within the various levels, and the ones that aren't, well, they probably didn't have that much potential anyways. The levels here are linear, despite being 3D environments. This doesn't mean they're simple and boring to explore though. They're filled to the brim with secret areas and collectibles, making each one effortlessly explorable. While Kirby is always on a set path toward the goal, your trek toward that goal isn't always so straightforward. Each level contains some optional hidden Waddle Dees Kirby must save in order to fully complete the game, and these are cleverly hidden, often needing to meet certain requirements in order to uncover them. For example, use a particular copy ability to beat an area mini-boss, or extinguish 7 fireballs before they hit the ground. The beauty of it is, you don't know what these secret Waddle Dee missions are going to be when you first run through the stage. This requires being very observant on your first time through, paying attention to everything as you progress through the level. Something as minor as some yet-to-bloom flowers might be the key to one of the stage's secret Waddle Dees. And because of how well they were hidden, it wasn't very often when I 100% completed a stage on my first attempt. Despite being as observant as I could, I always seemed to miss something. Luckily, the game doesn't put you on a wild goose chase in these scenarios. Instead, at the end of each level, if there are still missing Waddle Dees, the game will show you the objective needed for one of them still missing. This helps a lot and gives some much needed direction on subsequent attempts. Very much appreciated. Aside from traditional stages, there are also timed challenge areas called Treasure Roads, which see you using a particular Mouthful Mode or copy ability to reach the goal under the allotted time. I absolutely loved trying to clear every treasure road, as many of them require you to get creative with the ability around which they're designed. They pose a really nice bit of challenge, especially if you're looking to clear the suggested target times of each course. These target times provide a more hardcore objective beyond just clearing the stage. Completing some of these target times afford you very little margin of error too, so in order to clear them, you really need to master each course. I managed to get the target time on every treasure road in the game, but not without some pain and suffering. I'm looking at you, Masked Hammer. Target times don't count toward 100% completion, so they're not required to max out your file. In spite of that, I found the pursuit to be enjoyable and worthwhile, despite the lack of any meaningful in-game reward. As you progress, you'll see the game's hub world, Waddle Dee Town, slowly start to develop around you. It starts off pretty bare, but saving more and more Waddle Dees causes the infrastructure to increase quite a bit over time. This leads to the creation of various shops, a fishing spot, a coliseum for boss rush challenges, and some simple side modes like a light restaurant management game and a rolling marble puzzle that uses Switch gyro control. I don't know about you, but I love the marble puzzles, and I would pay for a full version of this as its own game if I could. At the end of each world, there's a big boss that you're required to defeat before the next area is unlocked. The Forgotten Land features some addicting and at times maddening boss fights. In general, just like the game's level design, the boss design is also on point. The later game bosses were especially good, with standouts being Silly Dillo, as the cinematic slowdown on his rollout attack teaches you how to really put Kirby's dodge roll to good use. Infecto Forgo, as aside from being a visual shock and plot twist, is really unique due to the fight actually doubling as a chase scene down a vertical hallway. Though not a difficult boss, it was a completely unique take compared to the bosses that came before it. My number one favorite though has to be the secret post-game arena boss, Chaos Elfalin, who was also by far the most difficult. This fight had me glued to the TV for hours, with many a failed run raising the stakes more and more. As soon as I thought I won for the first time, his final form emerged with an absolute barrage of intense new attacks that got me killed pretty quickly. Speaking of post-game, the Forgotten Land serves up a pretty decent offering after we roll credits. We then gain access to an entirely new dimension, Isolated Isles, which brings with it condensed, remix levels that are a mashup of all the worlds we've already completed. These are long, more difficult stages which contain around 50 collectible Leon souls, fragments of the life force of the Beast Pack's leader, Leongar. Collecting souls is the main goal of these stages, as nearly all of the Leon souls are required to unlock the final stage and the true endgame boss. However, 100% completion requires collection of all 300 Leon souls. And lastly, the most likely final hurdle for most players, collecting all 4 volumes of the figure collection. The main way of obtaining these figures is by using coins to play the gacha machines located in Waddle Dee Town. But figures can also be picked up inside of each of the levels, and some are unlocked by completing various achievements in-game, such as spending enough coins in the town shops. There's a handy figure album that shows your collection progress for each volume, and gives hints towards how to obtain special figures that are not available as a simple pickup. As I said, obtaining all the figures will likely be your last objective if you decide to 100% the game. It was for me. However, it didn't take me nearly as long as I anticipated. Once I got all the special figures, I was left at the mercy of the gacha machine to collect the 10 or so still missing. But surprisingly, either I got lucky or there's some kind of math that makes it easier to pull the missing ones, because I just spammed the level 4 gacha machine and it didn't take me very long to collect the rest randomly. For me, it probably took no longer than 10 minutes. There's also a trader Waddle Dee, who you'll discover very late game, who allows you to purchase missing figures directly for the price of a rare stone. I think that's a pretty steep price though, so luckily I didn't need to use him at all. The hardest part of the whole completion process for me was definitely Ultimate Cup Z, notably the Chaos Elflin boss fight I mentioned before. It's a tough, multi-stage fight at the very end of a 12-battle boss gauntlet in which there are limited healing items. It's quite the formidable final challenge. Like I mentioned at the start, I was strangely motivated to complete the Forgotten Land 100%, and I think that's because the designers made completion such a pleasant experience, with quality of life additions like the hidden Waddle Dee hints after clearing a stage, letting you know mid-Forgo level that you collected all Leon souls in the area, and even providing hints on special figures still not unlocked. Plus, you can always easily check your completion percentage at the game's pause menu. There are even a few more things to do past what the game counts as a 100% clear. For example, you can aim to get all the target times on the treasure roads like I did, and you can even grind for rare stones to power up all copy abilities to the max. I didn't go quite that far, but maybe someday. Kirby in the Forgotten Land is pleasant all around, and that's just so on brand for Kirby. The art is gorgeous, the levels are cleverly made, and you never know what to expect next during your playthrough. And this counts double for the ending, because this is where it changes real quick from pleasantly happy to pleasantly dark. I mean seriously, this is one of the most shocking game endings I have ever experienced. Beating Forgo Dedede at the end of Redgar sees us riding up to a mysterious lab with an ominous voice letting us know about a dangerous contained experiment nearby. It's here where we learn why the Waddle Dees are being sought after and held captive in the first place. They're being used to help power this giant facility. We learn about specimen IDF-86, whose only goal is to destroy everything in its path. This leads to the shocking revelation that our friend Elfilin is actually this being's other half, needed to unlock its true destructive power. And after the final confrontation, that same Elfilin tries to sacrifice itself to save Kirby and everyone else involved. Why am I on the verge of tears playing a Kirby game? It's a little bit ridiculous, but in the best possible way. The climax is truly potent, a tale of action, horror, and friendship. It goes above and beyond anything I would have expected, and because of that, well, it'll be burned into my memory for years to come. I frequently talk about series getting a Switch power-up. What I mean by this is iconic franchises like Mario and Zelda reached new heights on this platform, and more fringe series like Fire Emblem and Animal Crossing really skyrocketed into stardom thanks to the Switch as well. Pun not intended, I swear, but I feel like the Forgotten Land is Kirby's star moment, and a great example of a franchise level up. Is this the best Kirby game ever made? I'll have to get back to you on that. But as of right now, I really don't see it getting much better. I'm hoping The Forgotten Land is the start of a new approach to Kirby games going into the future. And based on its early success, more regular releases are hopefully on the horizon. As a somewhat new Kirby fan, I'll admit, I didn't take Kirby and his games all that seriously before this one. But now there's no denying, Kirby is on the map in the Switch era. And in a year where the Nintendo release calendar is being dominated by JRPGs and Squid Kid shooters, Kirby is the perfect pink palette cleanser, and I loved it to pieces.